Once around the park, James, and don't spare the horses.
It's showtime.
Indeed, it is showtime. Here we go. It's the Wednesday edition of On the Ledge, your Ontario Politics podcast. It is the daily edition, and as we record it, just afternoon here in this part of the world. And in past days, I would have said things may have changed by the time you hear this, given the tone and the sort of the feel and the vibe on the campaign trail. I'm not sure how much is going to change over the next few days, but there are a couple of interesting vibes that we picked up on yesterday that we want to continue with. So, welcome in. I'm Dave Trafford, and joining the table today, Monique Smith is here from Global Public Affairs. Lindsay Broadhead, you know her as member of our cast, our comms and strategy team on Now and Next. And Amanda Galbraith is a partner at Oyster Group. Welcome in all. And, I just, you're getting to a point now where I remember doing these dailies in the past, Amanda, and you hit that wall at around 5 days out from the election, say, okay, maybe this campaign could have been a week shorter.
Yeah, we've all been in war rooms where we're like, well, especially if you're winning, you're like, I really like this campaign to be a week shorter. That'd be really good. Or if you're really, really, really losing and you don't want to be there anymore. Yeah, I think certainly, at least the foregone conclusion, which was earlier that the PCs are likely to win, seems to be certainly there. And now it really is the race for second place, which even Bonnie Crombie has sort of alluded to, given the shift that she's audibly talked about. The interesting thing will be to see what's happening there right now, as we see there are numbers shifting, NDP versus the Liberals, and how those fortunes favor either one of those leaders. And I think in spite of their performances, which may not be what actually occurs in the end run. So we'll see who gets official party status or whatever. But yeah, I feel like I could do well with this election being done now from my side, but I'm not sure if my colleagues on the panel here would feel the same way. Well,
Monique, you've been in that situation where you've been, watching a campaign unfold. You've been campaigning yourself, and you get to this point, whether you're way ahead or you're scrambling to make up the gap. What's the challenge in terms of you keeping your team together on the ground in a local riding that is critical to the outcome?
Well, I've been fortunate in that the two campaigns I actually ran in as opposed to worked on, which are vast and many. In the two I was in, we were winning and it felt good. And, our elections were in October. So it was like September weather and we were doing well and people were excited and people were engaged. People were actually paying attention. So in those two elections, it was kind of nice. In other elections that I worked on where things have been going south or where we've been in challenging times for a variety of reasons, you do kind of hope it comes to an end pretty soon. And you're kind of counting the days until the finish line. But, I think there are still some fights to be had in this election. I think I agree with Amanda. I think we are looking at who's going to come out on top for number two. All of the benefits of incumbency have come to play for Doug Ford. No doubt about it. I mean, he had the money, he had the timing. There was no need for this election. I've said it over and over again. I actually believe this is voter suppression because, people up north, February elections are tough and it's not going to be easy to get the vote out. So that's Lindsay, the challenge ahead for people. Sorry, Dave, yeah. Just that said, with 9 days to go or however many days we have to go, we are coming up to early voting. And I think that at least the opposition parties are going to be working hard to get people out in the early voting just because the weather's so unpredictable. And so if it's decent weather Thursday, Friday, Saturday this week, they're going to be pushing to get people out because who knows what's going to happen next.
Yeah, and I was just going to say that, Lindsay, in terms of that early vote, that advanced polling, we'll always want to point to it and say that's what's going to make the difference one way or the other, or give us a hint of what to expect on the election day and outcome. It also gauges engagement. So that's part of it. But the other issue is here, just the mechanics and the logistics of getting voter cards out to people has been a challenge. And I've had like 3 or 4 people in the last 2 or 3 days say, shouldn't I have a card by now? So just getting to the advance poll properly, actually having a card that tells you where to vote, all of those things are still seemingly up in the air.
Yeah. I got my card yesterday in Toronto, but my mother reported to me yesterday in North Bay she doesn't have her card, and I said it's okay. We're going to go to the advanced polls, so we'll get you voted. But I think the logistics for Elections Ontario have been hugely challenging, and in different areas it's a little bit more challenging, particularly where polls are spread out. And you've got a number, like in my riding of Nipissing, we had 11 municipalities, so there's lots of people to get organized in advanced polls and in the regular polling.
And engagement is going to be the issue, not just for the staff who are running some of the campaigns one way or the other, or it's not just going to be about getting voters out. I think the weather in and of itself, I think Lindsay is going to play a bigger role in all of this, whether you're in Northern Ontario or you're in downtown Toronto. In fact, I think there might be parts of downtown Toronto that are harder to navigate than parts in Northern Ontario.
Well, I don't know about that, but I do know that get out the vote is now going to be, get out the shovel, get out the windshield wiper fluid, get out, you're going to need an armory of equipment. And there's going to be, jokes aside, quite a few people needed to help folks who can't get around easily. And of course, the most obvious thing is that there's going to be, as we saw in the last election with dismal results when the weather was good, there's going to be poor turnout. It's inevitable, and that's why elections never happen in the winter season. So this happened, varying reasons that we can unpack and we can judge and disseminate amongst ourselves. But at the end of the day, this is not a good time to have an election in Ontario.
A lot of conversation about, who's thrown in the towel early, if anybody is. Yesterday, we got in the middle of the conversation, and it was just interesting to us around the table to see where were the leaders the day after the debate. The premier was supposed to be in the Sioux. His flight got canceled because of what's going on at Pearson. But Amanda, it was noted that Bonnie Crombie in Hamilton making an appeal for the NDP vote. But it was Marit Stiles' appearance in Toronto with, I think she might have had, I don't know what, they got 9 MPPs in Toronto, and, everybody around her making it look very big, and, her making the point that she would be representing Toronto very well. Against the backdrop, I think Nick Nanos was talking about some of the numbers in Toronto do not look good for the NDP, and it's worse than anemic. I mean, based on the numbers that Nick's floating, there could be some real jeopardy for a lot of those 9 MPPs in Toronto.
Yeah, it's wild, actually, because, and I think honestly, this is a case of where, and I say this to my friends on the Liberal campaign and my friends on the NDP campaign, but this is to me a case of, it's not so much what those two campaigns are doing, but in fact, the impact of what's happening federally is really, I think, trickling down, which is, the departure of Justin Trudeau from the Liberal brand, the boy of Mark Carney's kind of taken that handcuff off of the Liberal brand provincially. And we're seeing, I think, a bit of a bump there. I also think the NDP campaign, while visually looks great, has yet to really punch through. Unlike Bonnie Crombie's campaign, which may be a little less polished, to put it mildly, although they've gotten better, but has a lot scrappier and kind of grabbing those viral moments to punch through at times when maybe the rest of us kind of scratch our heads, like, why are we talking about push-up contests, right? So I think that that's happening. I also think, unfortunately, Merit is being dragged down again by her federal cousin, Jagmeet Singh, who's nowhere and continues to be nowhere and continues to be a drag on that party. So, it's interesting to see how this is evolving. But to me, this spells real challenges for the NDP. And it's not just polling like French, like I'm actually doing kind of a like my other work, my Oyster Group hat, doing a little project with BetMGM, who's actually started doing odds betting in Ontario around political events, which is cool to me because I bet on sports, football occasionally, but not a politics. I know more about that. And even they're seeing a shift in their odds makers around saying it's more likely to be a Liberal government or Liberal opposition than an NDP opposition. So that's shifting there too, which is, to me, just everything looks like the NDP is going to be scratching for the seats they have. And if they do, in fact, collapse the way they are, I mean, that spells more votes for the PCs. That spells better odds for the Liberals to get party status. But I think this may work out for Doug Ford more than we'd expect.
Yeah, but Nick, when we look at the next numbers, I mean, it's I'm just reading them here. 36.9 say they would vote PC, 34.8 Liberal. That's within the margin of error, clearly. But there was a day when this would have been a, sort of a desert land for Conservatives. But whatever Doug's doing, he's resonating with the folks in Toronto.
It is kind of shocking. I think the fact that Merritt was out with all of her team in Toronto is a sign that they know they've got to shore up their support in Toronto. I mean, they're seeing the numbers just like everybody else. I heard some really disturbing numbers for them this morning too, not Nick Nano's poll, another poll, where they were down like to 15 or 12. Mm-hmm. Like, it was crazy numbers. And I just think it's really disappointing because Merritt's been the official, the NDP have been the official opposition. Merritt's had the structure of the official opposition office. I was chief of staff to the leader of the official opposition back in 99. So I know that it's not everything, but it's something. And compared that to, Bonnie and the Liberal team who've had, no support because they don't have party status. I mean, I think they are punching above their weight. And while her performance at the debate was a bit frenetic, I think it did attract some attention and people are listening to what she has to say. So, if they can continue that and continue to grab those moments of attention in the next 9 days, I think it bodes well for the Liberals. But I really think that it's going to be challenging for Merritt to kind of get out of this downward spiral that they seem to be in, which is unfortunate. And I would also agree with Amanda that I think the federal parties it is trickling down to the provincial side. I think the Mark Carney, upswing is definitely helping, rising all Liberal votes. And I think the absence of Jagmeet and his lack of ability to make an impression is probably hurting Merritt.
So I want to loop back then, Lindsay, and just kind of get at the strategy, the shift in tone, the shift in focus for the Liberals and Bonnie Crombie. And it started with the closing shot in the debate, but she sort of unofficially made it official yesterday at her Hamilton stop.
And that's why I'm reaching out today to NDP voters, and I'm asking them, if you want to change our healthcare system, please vote for Ontario's Liberals. And together, we can change the government.
And two things we observed yesterday was that she was in what is NDP territory in Hamilton. So, and there's a question as to whether or not maybe even the Tories could run the table in Hamilton. Who knows the way it's going. And then the next step was, where was she going to be today? Surprise, surprise, she's in Ottawa, where there are seats in play there. So back to, it's clear to me she's taking John Wright's advice and saying, go to the places where you're most likely to win, strategically shore up what needs to be done. And there seems to be some thoughtful strategy there that may, in fact, show signs of momentum, show signs of hope, as opposed to, on the other side, show signs of panic for the NDP.
Yeah, well, I guess it's a strategy, but I also hope it's kind of 101, where you go where the getting is good. And, and I've said this before, and everyone else, frankly, has said this before too, is that even though people claim this is a race and everyone wants to win as a leader, the Liberals and NDP are vying for official party status. Like that has to be the goal. And that saddens me as a nonpartisan because I want a healthy debate. But at the same time, that's the reality. And I think we've seen the dismal impact that it's had certainly on the Liberal Party over the last number of years when they haven't had a vote. They certainly haven't had the funding that comes with official party status. So that's what they're chasing. They're chasing the ripe, low-hanging fruit opportunities to convert, as they should be. And just going back onto what Amanda was talking about earlier, I find it fascinating that up to down impact that the federal government has, but I wonder in Toronto also if there is a bottom up impact of having a, NDP leaning city hall, and the last number of years of more NDP leaning arguments and policy. I wonder if that is having a shift at a moment in time when, we're talking about economics. We're talking about survival for many people, our safety, our nationhood. These are big, meaty subjects that usually fall center right, not center left. So there's a lot going on, but yeah, Bonnie and Merritt will be chasing, where those margins of opportunity are till the bitter end.
Yeah, I guess, Amanda, we in what we do, we're happy to split hairs and actually, confine things to certain silos, whether it's provincial, federal, or municipal. But, I'm hearing people here in Toronto just bitching endlessly about the snow removal. And as odd as that might sound, it's doing two things. It could affect the turnout of the voting next week because there's another 5 centimeters on the way. But the other part of it is, this is government failing me. I just got hit with a 6 or 7% tax increase in Toronto. The next day, you can't even remove my snow. So there may be something to what Lindsay's suggesting.
Yeah, I think actually Lindsay's very correct to point that out, right? I think we're seeing broadly a wholesale swing away from of what I would characterize as like a very progressive public conversation around, encampments, around supervised injection sites, around just how we treat social services, the size of the public service. And that's a conversation that certainly is echoing out of the US, but one we've been having for a while here in Ontario and in Canada. And you saw kind of Premier Ford move that way, right? Where the puck was, he was kind of, for example, supervised injection sites, it was like, we're not talking about, all of a sudden there was a political move right before the campaign to sort of say, no, it's not a priority for his government, and funding these where they are existing near schools and daycares, which to me is very sensible as someone who was around the corner from one where there was a shooting. So I think, yeah, Lindsay's right to point that out, is the appetite for progressive values. I think from an electoral perspective, we've been having it shoved at us by the prime minister candidly for the last 10 years. Now we're seeing it municipally, at least in Toronto, from Olivia Chow. Well, people feel their services they're receiving as actually receding, is a challenge for certainly for Merritt Stiles. Like that's all being influenced by I think at the margins, but I think certainly is a challenge for Merritt Stiles, who has run, a more atypical campaign you would see from an opposition leader with those resources, with those visuals. And yet, it's grim out there for them. And I actually feel for them because I have friends in that campaign. I know they've been working hard, but it may not actually translate at the end of the day.
So what's your read on that chemistry then, Monique, in terms of particularly federally and provincially? Because I thought it was interesting. Premier Eby was talking. They had their throne speech in British Columbia, and it was all about tariffs. Period. So it's not just Doug who's banging the drum on tariffs. That's resonating right across the country.
It's all we're hearing about, right? If you turn on the TV, you get Trump. You get Trump on something, and as soon as I think Canadians start hearing about Trump, they start thinking tariffs, because that's been ingrained in us in the last month, and as it should. But the provinces don't have much say in what is happening at the federal level as far as negotiating with the U.S. When I was in Washington for 5 years, we spent a lot of time talking to governors. And at that point, the governors were engaged in talking internationally. They wanted to talk to their subnational counterparts in different jurisdictions. We've got premiers who are going down to Washington at the end of this week for the National Governors Association, which happens every February. I'm not sure if the governors are going to be as interested, because right now they're having, their own existential crisis with their own federal government, talking about doing away with FEMA, the federal emergency response, talking about, stopping a lot of projects that are going on in their particular states, because it's not what Trump wants to move forward with. So they've got their own issues to deal with. I'm not sure that they're going to be as open to the provinces being there. That said, trade always is an issue for governors. And so, they will possibly get a moment to talk about that. But I think that the conflation of issues, federal, provincial, that Doug Ford has tried to do is succeeding in doing, is frustrating. But I think there's also a conflation on parties, and as Amanda said, and Lindsay also chimed in on, I think that the rising tide of the federal Liberals is helping Bonnie, and the diminishing tide of Jagmeet is not helping Merritt.
So let me ask you then, Monique, about the the strategy of coming out right after the debate and saying, hey, over here, if you really want to change the government, it's the Liberals who can do that. I mean, knowing full well that even combined, they wouldn't outvote Tories given the polls right now. But I understand the messaging. Is it the right strategy? I mean, I'm hearing Liberals say, wait, this is way too soon to be doing this.
It seemed like a little bit soon, but you also have to remember that they were in Hamilton, where the NDP and Merit have had some real struggles. So I think it was kind of a combination of, the opportunism of coming to the Liberals, but also emphasizing that the NDP aren't in really good shape in Hamilton, where they've normally had a stronghold. I do think that there is a growing, like my 22-year-old niece, who is not terribly politically engaged despite her aunt, told me about a website where you could go that would tell you what party to vote for that could defeat Doug Ford. And so in her riding, she was going to be voting NDP, and she was apologizing to me for that because her candidate had a better chance to beat Doug Ford. And I totally applaud my niece for engaging at that level in strategic voting. But I do think that there is, there is a bit of a growing trend among young people at looking at how do you strategically vote. And so maybe Bonnie jumping into that right now is a good thing.
Amanda, what do you think of that? Because I could see both ways in terms of this might have been throwing the rock in the pond a little too soon, and it's going to settle down by election day as opposed to having the effect you want.
Yeah, I thought it was early too. I was like, whoa. And also, I'm not sure how often these gambits work, candidly. I mean, I'm old enough to remember the only person that can stop Olivia Chow is Mark Saunders' switcheroo there in Branding, which worked really well for mayoralty. That being said, to the Liberal Bonnie campaign's credit, they've kind of made a habit of saying we're not like I'm just going to be blunt, like we're not going to win. We really want party status if possible. So let's just throw shit at the wall and see what sticks, right? So if we do this early enough, maybe because that really is the conversation right now: is who are they going to get official party status or not? Is Bonnie going to win her seat? And who now? Fascinatingly, are they actually going to become official opposition, which was something 2 weeks ago I thought, no way in hell will that happen. So they've been doing unconventional things, push-up challenges, you name it. Every day they talk about healthcare, no matter what happens, which is the message discipline I've only seen from the late Rob Ford, when all he talked about was subways, no matter what question he was asked, right? And that was so interlocked with his brand. So perhaps in this world where we're barely paying attention, if they beat the crap out of the only way you can stop Ford is voting to help fix healthcare is to vote for Bonnie, and that's all they do for the next 9 days. Maybe it will sink in for the 5% of the population that is actually paying attention to this election campaign. So, honestly, good for them for going outside the box.
Here's the other side of that coin, though, Lindsay. They may go out and they may get the seats they need to get official party status, but when you look at the 905 numbers, Crombie's in a fight just to keep her or win her seat. She doesn't even got a seat yet. And that could be, just a huge setback. It's great that we've got, official party status, but we don't got a leader. Yeah,
that would be immensely awkward. But these things happen. I don't know, Amanda and Monique would probably know the parliamentary details in terms of what happens better than me. From a communications point of view, that's a raging nightmare, because as leader, you're elbowing your way in to get the mic, or more likely you're handing it over to your colleagues who have a seat. Either way, it doesn't show what leadership tends to be, or what, frankly, we all in Ontario need it to be. So very desperate. Going back to your earlier question around Hamilton, what early, not early, one thing that I found interesting was I find the healthcare piece is late. And we've talked about this a little on previous shows, but I feel like it's been a litany of Doug Ford is responsible for this, avalanche of issues. And what they do is they just chip away at the top, and there's no depth to any of their critique. And there's certainly no depth to any of the proposition that they're putting on the table. Healthcare should have been the issue that was harnessed and mobilized and brought forward in a campaign in a far more intelligent way than it has. So I think it's late to the game on issue. early to the game, perhaps in terms of begging for others' votes, but on issue, I think it's been actually poorly formatted and late to the game.
Just if we go back to what they're up to today, as I pointed out, they're in Ottawa, the Liberals, that is, Amanda. And what I found interesting is that the question of where's the premier came up, and so I can see where vote for us because we can defeat him, and then the other side of it is, how do we hold Doug accountable? Bonnie stepped off script and kind of, I thought, made some good points in terms of where is he going to be. He'll dance around it, but I wonder whether or not this question is going to become part of the narrative over the next 8 days.
He should have the balls to say it to my face. That's what I'm saying to him right now. You got something to complain about? Come to me. Show your face. Where has he been? Where has he been? He called an early unnecessary election at the cost of $189 million. He's been absent for 50% of it. Okay, a couple of days went to Washington. Where has he been? Where is he today? He's been absent. And that's taking voters for granted. That is disrespectful. Show your face and be accountable for your record. Tell the 2.5 million people that don't have family doctors, explain to them why they don't. Be accountable and be a leader.
And she was responding to a question.
I love that. The energy.
Right? She was responding to a question about digging up details on one of her candidates in Ottawa, and she nailed it. But if nothing else, good rehearsal for leader of the opposition.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Part of me is like, does Bonnie need like a Xanax and a glass of wine or something? Like, she has looked pissed. I think, and the premier's, I believe he's in the north today, is my understanding, or he will be in the north soon or something. Anyway, listen, the premier's been doing what the premier does. He's out and about. He's went to Washington. Yes. He's been visiting ridings. He's racking up all these endorsements from labor unions, which is smart, right? Piecemeal, small pieces, but I think it's building a narrative for him. I like the fire from Bonnie. Again, I think this is a case of where if any of us were probably counseling the candidate in normal circumstances, you'd say, okay, like take it down by 10%. You don't need to be, but she's trying to punch through. And I think she's been more effective at punching through by using language like he's got the balls to say it to my face and all this kind of stuff. So good practice for opposition leader. If she actually wins her seat, which to her point, she may not, which would be wild. And I think they'll give the Liberals a real crisis to what to deal with. And I'm sure Monique has thoughts on that. But I think the premier has been running a very successful campaign where he is going to, mostly, lots of the seats are safe. Like he'll be probably going, my guess is to wherever there's swing or where there's opportunity, probably with this NDP collapse. If it continues, he'll be going there. And yeah, he's certainly strapping on the Captain Canada vest and going to Washington and advocating, which is his job as the premier. And I think candidly, probably where Ontarians want him spending his time. Based on their vote, which is they're saying he's doing a good job, whether people like it or not. So I don't mind the fire at all. And I think it would be fun to watch them face off. And again, I think good for the Liberal campaign. There's if anyone loves West Wing, there's like a let Bartlett be Bartlett sort of vibe. And if that's a let Bonnie be Bonnie and it's working for them, then Godspeed.
Okay, Dave, there's so much in there that I need to comment on.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go, Monique. Sort us out.
First off, I'm pretty sure one of your other commentators on this podcast is an official opposition leader who didn't win his seat. So maybe you could ask John Tory what the circumstances were and how that plays out. Secondly, on behalf of Keith Leslie, who's not with us today, Doug Ford has not done one Ontario interview. He runs away from the local press. He's doing Fox News, but he's not doing anything in Ontario. And I think in Northern Ontario, he avoided all the local press after the Northern debate. And I don't know if you watched to the end, because it was kind of difficult, but to the end of the provincial debate on Monday, the man had his binder under his arm and was heading for the door while the cameras were still rolling. Like, he is just avoiding the media like the plague. He does not want to answer questions. He's not being accountable. I totally support Bonnie in what she was saying there. Like, he should be in the province. If he called the election.
He is in the province.
He's not. He's going to Washington tomorrow, today.
So he's done 2 international trips as the leader of the head of the Council of the Federation, advocating for us in the middle of a trade war.
He called the election knowing
and wait for them to decide.
No,
like also
the election knowing
if you were advising a campaign that was 40 points up, 45 points up, Would you be telling your leader to go do scrums every day? Because anybody that's telling their leader who's 45 points up to do scrums with media, who are broadly, even as a member who has a show on a national radio, like we are irrelevant as far as the success of voters. They've proven that time and time again. So is Pierre Poilievre. And by the way, so is Mark Carney up in Ottawa, who's not rushing to do interviews with any national press here.
Mark Carney just did 20 minutes with Rosie Barton.
Finally, because everyone is jumping at the gills, and I think Liberals have less of a constitution to withstand those kind of criticisms. But like, he's ahead. He should not do a single media interview until after the election. That's what I tell him to do.
Okay, so there's no latency here, clearly, because you're just talking over each other. So hold on. But it just, and I appreciate the strategy here, Amanda. I get it. I mean, I'm the recovering news director. I get it. But at the same time, when we do have local issues, when we do have an issue that needs to be addressed, it's not out of whack to consider that to be disrespectful of the community itself. I mean, to be going door to door and doing door knocks is one thing. They don't do the debates. They don't do their town halls. They don't talk to local media. That's just disrespectful.
I totally disagree. He's been governing the province for 8 years. If they felt disrespected, they wouldn't vote for the guy, but they're voting for him. So obviously,
how many people are voting for him, Amanda? What's the turnout going to be in a snowstorm next Friday?
Monique, I'll finish my sentence I'll let you finish your sentences if you let me finish mine.
Okay.
So again, I don't think he's disrespecting people. Also, if journalists want to get interviews, they can go get interviews. For example, Tonda McCharles got Stephen Harper on record last week because she gate crashed an event that he was at. If journalists want to be journalists and get interviews, then stop waiting behind like stanchions. Go stick your mic in people's faces. Go find them and follow them. Like there's old school aggressive reporting, or there's we're going to wait for them to come down and dine with us. And you can choose either way. Listen, when I was a comm staffer, I dealt with both. And yeah, those people pissed me off, but they got interviews that others didn't because they were more aggressive. So people can pick their poisons.
Lindsay?
Go ahead, Monique.
Oh, I want to hear Lindsay's read on this from the comms perspective. I know she's enjoying it with the popcorn, but go ahead.
No. This is at the heart of politics right now, right? It's the death of traditional media. And I can't blame Ford for it because I think most journalists are doing it because it's the strategic thing to do. Now, it's a whole nother question about whether it's the ethical or right thing to do. And that has to do with your position as a politician, I think, and how open you want to be and transparent you want to be. But we also have to acknowledge the realities that a lot of our media have political skews and leaning. They come in with a pre-written paper, and this is left and the right. Their piece is pre-written. So this is the tragedy that is politics right now, is that politicians are being let to run without being held to account. And Ford is in the guy's under every microscope and investigation. Nothing's coming up yet. So you can't say he's dodged, public persecution in any way or shape or form. But the Ford brand has long history, he and his brother, in terms of creating their own media channels, their own media cycles, and their own content. That is what they do, and that's what they do very well. I agree with both of you because one is strategically right, and one I wish still occurred. I still wish the media had a greater force and could hold politicians to account. Sadly, that's just not where we are right now in this moment in time.
So let's look ahead, and a couple of questions for you. If we are to assume that a week and a day from now we're going to have another Ford government, Amanda, what's the first thing that has to be done? First, the question is, how quickly does the legislature come back?
I'd pull it back pretty fast if I were them. And I think you do kind of this is my 100-day plan. And I think my guess is he's going to come up pretty strong and hard on I've not talked to anybody. So I'm just blue skying this for the record. This is not anyone inside telling me this stuff. They'll come out with some sort of jobs support plan. This is how we're fighting for Ontario. We've got the reality of tariffs that's hitting Hamilton. It will be hitting Hamilton as soon as the writ is over. We may have some more around the auto sector, which will be a huge deal, right? Trump's musing about that today, coming into place in April. So my guess is they'll call it back. They will get to work on measures to support those sectors. And that will be his focus. That would be my recommendation. Sometimes what governments do is they win and they take a long time to plan stuff out and whatever. I guess they'll call back, throne speech, and then they'll get right to work.
Yeah, Monique, I think the other side of this is bringing a cabinet up to speed. I'm not sure that the current cabinet at dissolution is the one you're going to want, but you've got a lot of experience in that room that you're going to have to rely on, as opposed to parachuting somebody new into a key cabinet role, considering the economic situation that we're going to face in the coming months and year.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to, if they win next Thursday, they're going to have to come back pretty darn quickly, because I think nobody thought we should have an election. So you might as well start doing your job that you should have been doing all along. As far as cabinet, they will have a cadre of known players to choose from. So the vetting should happen pretty quickly. They may put in a cabinet of, if they want to get back really quickly, of veterans, and then, change them out over time to give them a little bit of flexibility. And having been one that's been involved in putting cabinets together, it's not an easy task. And it's, there's a lot of personalities at play and a lot of geography, a lot of considerations. So it's not an easy task, but I think they will probably take the path of least resistance, which is to come back quickly with a known quantity and start to make it look like they're doing something.
Yeah, and I would think that at some level, if in fact there is an increased mandate, that is more than the 83 seats that they left with, there are a few people who are going to be owed, some thank yous in all of that. So whether that shows up in a cabinet posting, but I think at this stage, Lindsay, the politics is one part of it. Right now, this group has to hit the ground running on policy.
Yeah. Well, if there's no official party status opposition, they're going to be allowed to, and frankly empowered to, go fast and go hard on any number of files. And that's going to cause quite a stir and a continuation of, accusations around, Ford running free, et cetera. But the fact is, if there's no opposition, there's no opposition. And his platform does run. So he's got some pretty bold, big ideas around how to address congestion. The famous this tunnel under Highway 401. I don't know if that is smoke and mirrors or if he actually wants to go big, but he certainly does on highways. So the guy's going to start building. He's got, and it's a lot of on Toronto focused things, really. Ontario Place, full throttle. He just has a mandate to go full steam ahead without any consequence, including looping back to the media that we just talked about. It's going to be very hard for anyone to have a balanced point of view in any particular piece. So great for podcasts and pundits, but probably less great for democracy as a whole.
And we'll hold off on having conversations about what it's going to mean to the opposition, because I think, there's so many variables out there. In a strange way, this outcome, though, to me, Amanda, only reinforces Monique's criticism, is that we didn't need this election. He's just going to roll back into office with, all kinds of strength and muscle.
I mean, I guess, but candidly, he said, it's a purview of the government to call an election. Political parties of all stripes do this. It's a question of the people of Ontario is, do you feel that this government has a mandate to do this, and this is what we want to do, and who do you like, right? And guess what? All three parties have put forward, this is what I believe in. And the people of Ontario are rendering their verdict, which is they like what Doug Ford and his government's doing, and they like it so much that, to Lindsay's point, he may come back without, which I actually don't think is good for him either, for the record. I've been a part of opposition, like minority parliaments federally, and I've been a part of, around, but not in majority governments. And those are harder because you have to manage, everybody thinks they deserve a cabinet position, and there's there's a lot more infighting and a lot less fighting the enemy outside. And it's also a third mandate, which is going to be challenging regardless. The third mandates are challenging for any stripe of government, no matter what level of government. And I think this will be a hard one. And he's going to be facing Trump, and potentially, if there is a sea change in Ottawa, either with, there will be either it's Carney or it's Pierre Poilievre. Pierre Poilievre government is not going to be easy on a Doug Ford government, not even a little bit. So I think it's actually going to be really rough sails for him going into the next bit. But to me, the was beating the drum on the election that was of no point. Like fair, like sure, I understand why the opposition's making that point, or people are opposed to making that point. I don't think the people of Ontario care, and I think there's election, it's happening. They're going to render a verdict. Their verdict is they like the guy.
When we look at that again, go back to that. So the chemistry federally and provincially, and to Amanda's point, Monique, how much do you think Ford is trying to get as much done as possible before we actually have a federal election? Because the rug could move there just by having Pierre Poilievre in the Prime Minister's office.
Absolutely. There's, there are a lot of variables in his future, including a criminal investigation into what's going on in his world.
Doug Ford's calling you.
Greenbelt.
Watch out.
I think that just to go back to what Amanda said, that people don't really care about, I don't know, Amanda, I don't want to put words in your mouth. So I don't know if you said they don't really care about the election, or they're happy with Ford and so they're moving forward. I don't know that people are happy with Ford. I don't know that enough people are actually paying attention that we're having an election. I don't know that there are enough people in Ontario who are engaged and paying attention, because we shouldn't be having this election, which I know you think I'm beating the old drum. But I think that is bringing, interest down. Turnout's going to be low. His mandate's going to be maybe about the same, but to what end? We spent $180 million on an election we didn't need. To do what? To show that people weren't paying attention? Like, I don't get the people are supporting Doug. I don't believe that. I don't believe that his numbers reflect where people really are. I think the numbers reflect people not paying attention.
Well, our friend John Wright will say that, remind us all, as he wants to do, you only need 37% to get the majority government. So it's not unusual for that, whatever, 50 odd percent or 40 odd percent or whatever it happens to be, could be against you, and you could still get, into government situations. So that's kind of the dynamic we're facing. I'm not sure how excited people get about it in our part of the world, because we want to have something to talk about, and we came into this hour thinking there wasn't much to talk about, but guess what? Thank you all. That was a spirited conversation. Lindsay Broadhead, Monique Smith, and Amanda Galbraith, and regular contributors to our Traveling Wilburys team here on the Ledge, and it's just been great to kind of have folks be able to dip in with that level of experience and insight. And if you want to get involved in the program, by all means, just a reminder again, we've got the talkback button. You can go to my website, davetrafford.com, leave your message. And if it's suitable, there's a few in there. Some of them not really suitable. We'll include them in the program by all means. davetrafford.com, hit them, talkback message, and away we go. All right. So that'll do it for us today for February 19th. Just 8 more sleeps until Election Day. It's On the Ledge, your Ontario Politics podcast, the daily edition for Story Studio Network.
This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.